It's no secret that vegans have to deal with a plethora of terrible arguments attempting to justify the use and exploitation of non-humans. What's more surprising though is that even highly intelligent, well-educated people often use the same terrible justifications, albeit formulated in a seemingly more sophisticated way. Unfortunately, smart people defend stupid ideas all the time. Today we're going to go through Jordan Peterson's hopeless attempt to dismiss animal rights.
Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge were recently urged to boycott the Calgary Stampede when they visit Canada in July, as part of an anti-rodeo campaign mounted by a European animal rights organization, Fight Against Animal Cruelty.
The Calgary Stampede is an annual festival held every July. Here's some footage from this lovely family event.
This group pursues a relatively moderate agenda, as such things go. I say moderate, because an ever-growing number of people would like to extend the idea of animal rights much further. Will Kimlicka, a professor of philosophy at Queen's University, has even claimed, quote, that some animals should be seen as forming sovereign communities.
If we're defining sovereign communities as those having control over their own lives and therefore free from outside rulership, I don't see the issue with this statement even when it's taken out of context. Can anyone seriously argue that bonobo apes and chimpanzees who live in the wild aren't capable of having their own sovereign communities? One of the things I find most problematic about Peterson is that he literally makes up his own definitions of words, leading to confusion about what he's actually saying. An example of this is how he changes the definition of religion to suggest that everyone is religious, regardless of whether or not they believe in a god.
If you look up what religion means in the Webster Dictionary, you get something like a system of faith centered on a supernatural being or beings or something like that. But I've heard you use religion to describe things like punk rockers, for example, that's a religious experience. So my first question would be, how do you define what is considered religious? And then sort of as a follow-up to that, if, say, Sam Harris...
Religious is what you act out.
What's that?
Religious is what you act out.
Anything you act out.
Everything you act out is predicated on your implicit axioms. And the system of implicit axioms that you hold as primary is your religious belief system.
He's been doing this so frequently when he discusses religion and truth that it honestly wouldn't surprise me if he was using this tactic when discussing other contentious topics. Thus, I'm honestly not exactly sure what he means when he talks about sovereignty and rights here. In his co-authored book, Zoopolis, Kimlicka states, having acknowledged that animals are living beings whose suffering matters morally, why is it so hard to take the next step and acknowledge that animals have moral rights not to be used as means to human ends? While I don't hold the belief that moral rights exist, I believe that if we acknowledge that non-humans can suffer and that their suffering matters, then rights would be instrumental in protecting non-humans from most of the suffering that our species are inflicting onto them. I believe non-humans should have legal rights for the same reasons humans should have them. They are good heuristics for improving well-being.
And that others should be seen as full citizens of the polity. He means citizens like you and me.
Just to be clear, providing some non-humans with citizenship doesn't mean that these non-humans would be treated equally to humans in every respect. They wouldn't be given the right to vote, they wouldn't be given state pensions. The legal rights given to non-humans would be adjusted for relevant differences in preferences and capacities. And we do this for humans too. It's not like we give infants the right to vote, or biological men the right to abortions. Some beings do not have specific interests. For example, a chicken doesn't have an interest in voting, so we wouldn't grant a chicken the right to vote. This wouldn't make any sense. However, a chicken does have an interest in not having their beak cut off with a hot blade, similar to how you and I have an interest in not having our noses cut off with a hot blade. Justice is basically to give equal considerations to equal interests. Furthermore, we do not have to lower the moral status or legal rights of humans in order to create a legal system that takes non-humans into account. Just as developing the legal rights of trans people hasn't had a detrimental effect on the legal rights of non-trans people. There's no reason to believe that developing the legal rights of non-humans will have a detrimental effect on the rights of humans. I know that Peterson didn't explicitly make either of these arguments. He simply said,
he means citizens like you and me,
in a way which implicitly suggested it was a bad thing. and left it to the audience to guess the reasons why. This is classic Peterson. He uses vague language and unspecified terms to gain the sympathies of his audience while leaving them in the dark as to what he's actually talking about. Talking like this is a useful tactic if you want an easy way out when someone challenges your argument, because you can simply state that you are describing the views of others rather than your own.
Singer denounces speciesism and claims that we should show equal respect to the lives of human beings and animals. All three refuse to distinguish between the claim that we have responsibility to animals and the claim that animals have rights.
While Peterson is only making a descriptive point about what Singer is saying here, it seems that he is suggesting that he has a problem with Singer's claim that we should give equal respect to both humans and non-humans. It seems to me that Peterson thinks that Singer wants equal treatment of humans and non-humans. Or even if this isn't what he means, this is likely what the audience will think he means. When Singer claims that we should show equal respect to the lives of humans and non-humans, he's talking about equal consideration. This means that if in a specific instance a non-human experiences the exact same amount and intensity of suffering as a human, this suffering should be given equal consideration. To say that the human experience matters more simply because they're human would be speciesist. While species membership may correlate with morally relevant traits like sentience, appealing to species to justify lesser moral worth is arbitrary discrimination. It's the individual's capacity to suffer and experience well-being that should be taken into account when making moral judgments. Discriminating against non-humans because they are part of a different species is exactly the same logic as discriminating against other human beings because they are not part of your specific group. Speciesism refers to discrimination based on species, whereas sexism refers to discrimination based on sex, and racism refers to discrimination based on race. In relation to the distinction between the claim that we have a responsibility for animals and that animals have rights, I believe that as our ability to influence the lives of others expands, so too does our responsibility. When it comes to vulnerable human beings, not only do we feel obligated to avoid causing them harm, we actually put policies in place to protect them. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't expand our circle of moral responsibility to include non-humans. Rights, on the other hand, are simply legal rules which are instrumental in improving the well-being of the individual. So, if we were to grant non-humans equal consideration, it then makes sense that we would grant them the rights to reflect this. To emphasize my point that appealing to species in order to determine moral worth is as arbitrary as appealing to biological sex, I'm going to give you a historical example. When feminist Mary Wollstonecraft published her book Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792, her views were widely regarded as absurd. And before long, an anonymous publication was made of a book titled Vindication of the Rights of Brutes. In this case, brutes refers to non-human animals. The author of this satirical work, now known to be Thomas Taylor, a distinguished Cambridge philosopher, tried to refute Mary's arguments by showing that they can just as easily be applied to non-human animals. The arguments seem to hold for these brutes too. Yet to hold the position that non-human animals are deserving of rights was seen as manifestly absurd. Therefore, Taylor concluded that Mary's reasoning for women's rights must be unsound, because the very same reasoning can be used to justify animal rights. If you ever attempt to justify our society's treatment of non-human animals by appealing to group, making statements like, "they're only animals," you're contributing to a vast history of illogical and harmful arguments, and you're in the company of an absurdly long line of racists and sexists.
They don't care that animals cannot reciprocate their so-called rights, even though such reciprocity constitutes a cornerstone of the social contract.
It's not that these philosophers don't care, it's just that they may not agree with you that the inability to reciprocate is a morally relevant characteristic. I'm assuming that Peterson is aware that infants and severely mentally disabled people aren't always capable of reciprocating our social contracts either. Yet he's not in favour of holocausting them. Or is he?
What kind of question is that?
There are tribes of human beings who are still living hunter-gatherer lifestyles. They are completely cut off from society. We have flown helicopters over them, attempting to observe their lives, and they have attacked the helicopters using bows and arrows. They do not hold any social contract with us. Would we be justified in killing or torturing them due to a lack of a social contract? No. Neither then would we be justified in torturing or killing non-humans due to a lack of a social contract. Non-humans, just like humans, deserve legal rights protecting them from all the despicable things our species do to them, regardless of their ability to reciprocate. An individual's ability to reciprocate is irrelevant to that individual's moral worth. As Jeremy Bentham said, the question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer?
What kind of question is that?
To sum up, Jordan Peterson fails miserably in his attempt to dismiss animal rights. He implies that Singer's argument for equal consideration to non-humans is absurd, but he fails to actually provide any arguments as to why this is so. Furthermore, Peterson brings up irrelevant characteristics when discussing moral worth, like the ability to reciprocate. While Peterson may sound more sophisticated than the average bacon troll, if we pay close attention to what it is he's saying, it's garbage. Thank you for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons for supporting this channel. Until next time.